Welcome to the Albert Clark Show, a transformative podcast where we embark on a profound journey through the key themes of life. Join us as we delve into the rich narratives woven into the works of acclaimed author Albert Lynn Clark, known for his compelling novels Lightning and Thunder, A Miracle Love Story, An Ancient Destiny, Escape from Earth. In each episode, we will explore essential life topics such as miracles, love, hope, loss, destiny, and transformation. Through heartfelt discussions, personal stories, and insightful interviews with guests, Albert will guide us in understanding how these themes shape our lives and connect us to one another. Whether you're seeking inspiration, healing, or a deeper understanding of your own journey, this podcast is designed to resonate with your heart and mind. Tune in as we celebrate the currents of life that unite us all, illuminating the path toward love, hope, and personal growth.
A testament of faith, a beacon of light.
Good morning, everybody. This is Albert Clark, Albert Lynn Clark, the author of multiple books, Lightning and Thunder, A Miracle Love Story, an Ancient Destiny series of 4 science fiction books, and this book, which is World War III. It started with EMP. I'm going to tell you where that came from. Back in 1986, I attended Air War College, which is 48 graduate semester hours of military education, and part of that education was there was one chapter out of a stack of books that were waist high if I would stand up beside the pile of books I had to read in the year that I spent in Air War College while I was working full time. So this was nights and weekends that I was working on the classwork and going in and taking tests. And then the second semester, I had to write a term paper on any subject I thought was pertinent to the military. So I wrote a paper saying, hey, the next war is going to be in the Middle East, predicting the Gulf War. Well, Air War College said we would never send tanks and troops to the Middle East. So they gave me an unsatisfactory, and I had to write a new term paper saying, oh, Russia's the enemy, obviously. But after I graduated from Air War College, I decided to take that term paper of 30 pages and turn it into a book, a full book of World War III. It started with EMP. And basically how that works is that I took a part of my life where I would travel. I spent years, about 1 week per month, I would travel to a research and development program and help them develop a 20 or 30 year schedule and budget for developing some kind of new weapon. And so I was exposed to all kinds of new stuff that some of which is, even though I've been retired for 20 years, some of it's just now becoming public. where people know what I did now, but of course my name's not attached to it because I was just the advisor from headquarters that came down to help them develop a plan for developing that new system. So anyway, the book starts with me being out at Space Division in Los Angeles. Had just got through working on a program out there, and I was staying in a hotel getting ready to fly home to Ohio in the morning. Well, 2 o'clock in the morning, I wake up for some reason, and it's dark. Even my clock radio is dark. So I go to the window, and I look out the window, and it's dark. There are no street lights, no cars driving anywhere. 2 o'clock in the morning, you don't expect heavy traffic, but you do expect some kind of lights. And there's not a light to be seen as far as you can see, and I'm up on the 4th or 5th floor of that hotel, and I should be able to see for miles, but there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. And so I go and look at my old wind-up alarm clock that I always take along because, hey, it's reliable. I wind it up, I set it for early in the morning so I can make my flight, and it ticks away. And it has the luminescent hands so I can see the time even in the dark. And it says it's a little after 2 o'clock in the morning. And I said, well, wow, that's been some huge power outage. I wonder if the airplanes are still flying. So I make my way down to the lobby. Now the battery-powered exit lights are still on. There's no elevator, of course, so I have to walk down the stairs to the lobby, which is glassed in and facing the airport across the street. And as I'm going to the cashier's desk, which is lit up by flashlights, an airplane comes in and with no lights, and there's no lights at the airport, and the airplane crashes into the buildings beside the runway and burns. Now we got light from flames as the airplane burns. And of course there's no fire department to go out and put the flames out. So nothing's happening except this huge crash. And looking out into the street now, I can see cars stalled every which way, parked here and there and in the middle of the street, and no people. The only people I see are wandering around trying to find light and wondering what the heck happened. So I walk out into the street, and I've got this impression that there has been an EMP attack or a solar flare or something that's wiped out all the electronics in the area. But having read up on EMP and worked on multiple programs where we tried to provide protection from military equipment for EMP so it would still operate in a nuclear war. I'm pretty sure there's been an EMP attack. It might be a military attack, or it might be just a solar flare coming from the sun. Back in 1859, there was a thing called the Carrington event, where a solar flare had a direct hit on the United States, and we didn't have transistors back then, but we had telegraph. We didn't have telephones, but we had telegraph. And the telegraph wires, in some cases, were burned completely off the poles. In some cases, where the wires did not burn off, the keys, you tap, 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 Morse code, put off sparks and started fires in the telegraph offices. Not a happy thing to happen. And for 2 hours after the Carrington event, they were able to send telegraph wires to other stations that still had wires without batteries to operate them, which normally they were operated on batteries. But they didn't need batteries because the electrical wires were already charged with lots of power. And that was not a nuclear bomb, obviously. We hadn't invented nuclear bombs yet, but that was just a solar flare. Ontario, just a few years ago, had a total blackout because a solar flare came close enough to hitting Ontario that knocked out their power grid for days. About that time, there was a noise of a car running all by itself coming out of the parking garage, and it was an old Mercury. They don't make Mercuries anymore, but this is one of those old big ones, the 6,000-pound big car with a 460 cubic inch engine, because it needed a big engine to be able to haul that big car. And it was driven by the two girls that used to work in the bar of the hotel. And every time I'd gone to Los Angeles, I'd stayed in the same hotel, and I would go down to the bar late at night and sit underneath one of the roof spotlights at one of the booths in the bar, which were usually empty about that time of the morning, and I would sit there and read my book. And the two girls that were aspiring actresses working as barmaids, trying to break their way into the movie theaters, would come by and talk, and we would just sit there and talk, and I would sip my drink. I'd buy I'm not a teetotaler, but I would buy one drink, bourbon water usually, and I'd sit there and drink that for hours while I'm reading my book, waiting to, for whatever, to go back to work in the morning or fly home from the airport or whatever. And they stopped when they saw me and said, "What's happened?" Nobody could start the cars except our car started, and so we're just on our way home, and all these cars are stalled everywhere, and people just wandering around on the street that probably came from those cars that died. And I said, "I need to get to the Air Force Station, which is close to the airport here. Can you give me a ride?" And they said, "Sure." So I hopped in the back seat and gave them directions on how to get there. And when we got to the gate, the gate was closed. There were some spotlights that were running on emergency generators that were EMP proof. And so there was some light there at least, and which is kind of strange because nowhere else were there any lights except for the emergency generators that had EMP protection at the Air Force Station. And as we were talking to the guards about how everything is restricted and they're not quite sure what happened, but all the power is out everywhere and there aren't very many cars that will run, and there we are. And I showed them my identification and so forth, and I asked to speak to one of the commanders that I had been working with, that was a general officer, and he said, and they basically were saying, "This is not a good time, you better go get on an airplane and go home." Well, I don't know whether there's any airplanes or not because I don't think there are. About that time, a truck comes flying around the corner and filled with a whole bunch of raggedy people that were, and they took the corner too fast. They hit the concrete center meridian and tipped it over and crashed. And of course I went running to help, and the guards came out with their guns to help. And the people on that truck that had tipped over all had automatic weapons, Uzis and AR-15, not AR-15s, but fully automatic AR-16s, which are military grade instead of civilians. And they're pretty much scrambled, and they started firing off some shots, and of course the security police starts firing off shots, and they call for help. And I go running in there to and discover there's a some kind of box with a timer on it that's ticking off time, and I knew it was a bomb. I started ripping off wires, and the timer quit. So I was hoping we weren't going to blow up. Anyway, naturally, the commander that told me come back another time was there, along with lots of security force now, and it turns out that was a nuclear bomb they were planning to explode on the ground at the Air Force Station, which does a lot of research for space programs and missiles. So anyway, the city is starting to light up now because there are fires everywhere. The looters are setting fires. They're setting fires to cars. They're looting from stores, trying to take all the fancy electronics that will never work because, hey, they've been destroyed by EMP. Now, let me explain a little bit about EMP while I'm there. You see the glowing picture of northern lights in the background. Basically, that is EMP. But we have a magnetic field around the Earth, and the ionosphere keeps the electronics from actually hitting the Earth, but it causes the sky to glow because of electrons flying around up there that are being knocked loose and flying around. So a nuclear bomb going off 300 miles above the Earth would cause a 50 to 100,000 volt surge of electricity, where the electrons from that explosion would hit the ionosphere at very, very high altitude, 200 or 300 miles up, and it would cause a cascade of electrons being knocked loose from atoms in the air that would get worse and worse and worse until it overcame the magnetic field around the Earth and would hit the Earth with 50 to 100,000 volts of electricity. Now, it's low amperage because it's basically static electricity, which, the kind you get when you walk across a carpet and you hit the light switch and you get a spark that's an inch or so long and you say, wow, that hurt. Well, that's what we're talking about, except that a transistor will only take 5 volts or less. So anything with a transistor will no longer work. That old Mercury car made before transistors still ran. Some military equipment will still run because it's protected from EMP. But there isn't anything civilian made that's protected from EMP, so imagine trying to live with no transistors. No phones, no television, no radio, no police department, no fire department, no cars for transportation, and no trucks bringing supplies into the cities. And cities will run out of food within 3 days. The grocery stores will be empty. The 2 girls and I decided that we're going to get out of Los Angeles before it burns to the ground. So we take off heading east. Of course, we've got to go north or south to get on a main road going east. And as we're driving, there's forest fires burning because of the fires in the cities, and which have spread to the forests. And so we're driving basically almost through flames trying to get out of town. And we start heading east. Now, we had done some looting of our own, and the military had given me some military equipment to fight my way across the country, try to get home, because they knew from what happened that the United States is in trouble. And so we ended up with a couple of shotguns and some ammunition and so forth that we got from the base. And we, as we're trying to get out of town, we found a sporting goods store, and we did our own share of looting, picking up ammo and so forth of civilian equipment, civilian guns and so forth, 12-gauge shotgun shells and things like that. And we loaded up that old Mercury, and we grabbed some food from a grocery store that was already in the process of being looted, and we're heading east. Anyway, so the first half of the book is we're heading east. We're trying to get home. My home was in Ohio. One of the girls from the bar also lived in a different town in Ohio, so she wanted to go to Ohio too. The other girl said, Ohio's fine with me. I don't have any place else to go. And, 2 of us are really good friends. Maybe we can find out a place to live with her. And she's from a farm, so maybe they will have food and whatever at the farm, and we'll be able to survive there. So, anyway, this is not an easy thing. We can't get gas at a gas station, but there's lots of cars that we can siphon gas out of because they're parked all over the interstate and alongside the interstates, because they can't run because they have no transistors. Their transistors got blown up by the EMP. And remember, it's not just that northern lights like we see in the background of my photo here, but it's like that, except much more powerful. And you won't see it. Well, you might see it flash, but anyway, it doesn't do any damage, and there's no windows broken or anything like that. It's just that anything with a transistor no longer exists. So we make our way across the country, and there's various different experiences we have along the way, hiding out in a summer cabin in the mountains, going through Alamosa, Colorado, where the people there in town have, and the local farmers and ranchers have sort of congregated in town to guard their city, a small city. It's not a very big city, but I've been there lots of times. It's a beautiful place in the middle with mountains all the way around, all 360 degrees around the town. Not real close, but there where you can see them. And they barricaded the town, and to protect what little supplies they have, and they brought stuff from their farms and ranches and brought them into the town to try to protect them from looters, which they've already had problems with. And they let us go through and help us along the way. And anyway, multiple experiences as we travel east. And when we finally get to 𝘞𝘵𝘢𝘳𝘵 in Missouri, on the Mississippi River, we discovered there are no bridges going across the Mississippi River because they were actually mined and blown up remotely by long-range planning. And matter of fact, after I wrote my book, they actually sent the Army Corps of Engineers out to inspect the bridges, and they discovered that some of the bridges were already pre-wired with explosives. But the explosives had been there so long, probably placed there by Russians to cut the United States in half by blowing up the bridges and being able to prevent any transportation, ground transportation, back and forth across the Mississippi River. Anyway, we don't know who put it there, but they had been, those explosives had been there so long that the fuses had basically rotted off, so they weren't going to work. But in my book, they do work. And they blew up all the bridges all up and down the Mississippi River to prevent crossing the Mississippi River and cutting the country in half. So anyway, there we are stuck in 𝘞𝘵𝘢𝘳𝘵, Missouri for weeks trying to figure out how we're going to get across that bridge. In the meantime, refugees from Chicago are working their way south, heading toward Lake 𝘞𝘵𝘢𝘳𝘵 and looting whatever farms and so forth they go as they, heading south. And Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri is a small military unit, and they're surrounded too. There's not much they can do. Anyway, long story, but anyway, that's the first half of the book is we're trying to go home. I don't know whether, my wife is still there or not, or whether she's died because of looting or what, but I lived out in the outside of town in a small suburb, actually outside a small suburb in a separate housing area where we'd build a passive solar house. So, don't know whether she's there or not. No way to phone ahead. There's no phones. But we're heading east, trying to get home. And that's the first half of the book. Second half of the book is there's an army sergeant who was driving an M1 tank in southern France to try to prevent the Arabs from conquering Europe, which are coming up from the south. They came across through Yugoslavia, Greece and Yugoslavia and so forth, and made it through Italy, and now are trying to head north into France. And a small military group had taken some M1 tanks and trying to intercede, and he got his treads blown off his tank, and the tank group actually overwhelmed by Arab forces with airplanes and so forth bombing them. And so he takes off on foot, and as he's traveling north to try to find out where the heck Allied countries might still have some control, so he's heading north with the idea of getting to Paris and maybe somewhere north. And as he goes, he finds an American female. Naturally, got to have a girl here somewhere, and she is an American, but visiting distant relatives for the first time she's ever been to France, and she's visiting relatives there that are long lost cousins and so forth, and has been staying with them in a small town in France. And the two of them end up heading north, trying to get back to friendly forces, sneaking their way through and around Arab forces that are gradually moving north. And they finally make it to Allied forces, and they manage to make it to England, and then the original hero from the first half of the book that finally made it to Ohio, and he end up getting together, and they start working toward getting the United States recovered. One of the inventions that I made in the book were drones. Now, we know drones are being used everywhere now, but back in 1986, when I wrote the book, I described drones that were far more capable than the current drones that we have today. The United States uses Predator and Global Hawk drones and so forth for intelligence, and some of them will even carry missiles where they can hit targets on Earth from the drone, and the idea of a drone is you don't have a pilot. Therefore, you don't have an oxygen system. You don't have an ejection seat. You don't have displays in the cockpit because there is no cockpit because there's no people. So they can stay airborne longer, and technically a drone could be able to do maneuvers that you could not do with a human pilot on board because the pilot could not survive the G-forces of pulling a 30 turn, but you could outfight any other manned airplane very easily. And I also, these drones that I use in the book are stealthy. Whoa, where'd stealth come from? We didn't have stealth back in 1986. Anyway, my drones did have stealth. Basically, when they're basically flying Gatling guns, like the A-10 airplane with its 30 millimeter cannon, rotary cannon, and with ammo on board and controls to be able to remotely fly, and artificial intelligence to where pilots did not have to actually guide them all the way to the target area. They would just give the command for them to take off from an airbase somewhere, not necessarily where the pilot was, and the drones would take off. They'd fly to the battle zone, and then the human controllers could take control of them to actually point them at particular targets. And as they locked in on a target, they could then switch the human capability to a different drone. So one pilot could be controlling multiple drones, and the drones would use the commands of that pilot to use their artificial intelligence to go hit the target that the human operator designated for them. And they can't avoid these drones because, hey, they're fast, they're small, and they can maneuver far better than anything else. So my drones in the book are far advanced compared to the drones we see being used today in the newspapers. So anyway, read the book. I'm hoping it'll get made into a movie. And next time when you wake up in the morning and there's no electricity in the house, everything's dark, there's no telephone, you go out and try to start your car, it won't start. You discover your neighbor's cars don't start either, and everybody is wandering around wondering what's going on. You better check your supplies in your pantry, because there's no grocery store that's going to have food after 3 days. So it might have happened. It might have been a solar flare. It might have been a nuclear attack by a third world country. Now, North Korea and Iran both said they wanted nuclear bombs and long-range missiles to be able to hit the United States with EMP. But the news media and in general the military have ignored that, even though they publicly stated that, why they want nuclear bombs and why they want long-range missiles, and they've been working on it. So it could happen tomorrow. Read the book, watch the movie if it ever gets made into a movie. There's also an audio book of it. It's available on Kindle. It's available on paperback, hardback. They're all available on Amazon or other bookstores, Barnes & Noble, etc. And while you're at it, read my other books, Ancient Destiny, which is a 4-book science fiction series, where I couldn't find a science fiction book I liked. I got tired of some of the current movies like Star Wars, which is basically the same story over and over and over again with the rebels against the Empire. Whoa, gee, that's new, right? I really enjoyed the first few Star Wars movies, but I got tired of them, so I wrote my own books, and it turned into be a 4-book series. And then I have a love story that was absolutely true, and that I was married for 45 years. It's Lightning and Thunder, a miracle love story. And you wouldn't believe the miracles. I wouldn't believe it if somebody else wrote the book. But I wrote the book myself, and all of the miracles happened. Now, maybe not all of them were miracles. Some of them could have just been chance. But there was too many. When miracles happen on a regular basis, again, you have to believe there's a higher power somewhere. So read that book too. Lightning and Thunder has been translated into multiple languages. It's in French, Spanish, Japanese. Anyway, it's in multiple languages, sold all across the world. Ancient Destiny is also being sold in bookstores and online all over the world. World War III is my first book. I wrote it years and years before I wrote any other book. Enjoy, have fun, take the messages in the book to heart, change your life. With that, I'll say goodbye this time.